Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's already 4:03, and I think it's a good time to start the webinar today. I'm Srividya. I'll be host of the session. This is our second edition to Dhiway Dialogues, and we are very happy to have you all join us. Dhiway is a tech startup from Bangalore, and we are on a mission to instill belief, confidence, and absolute certainty in this vast digital landscape. Our monthly webinar, which is Dhiway Dialogues, serves as a dynamic forum where we bring together internal experts who are a part of our team, like the speaker of today, and valued customers who are part of our journey, and partners for some engaging conversations. We see that each conversations are are more interactive, and that's why this format of webinar is like this. Last time, we touched upon the world of verifiable credentials, and this edition focuses on a little more interesting topic of securing student data with Mark Studio. Before we see what our speaker has it for us, a few housekeeping rules as moderator I want to give. Please keep your microphones always muted because that's very important for the speaker to finish the presentations and also to interact with you after the session. There will be a Q&A session, and you can post your questions on the chat platform. We are also going to take it. We are very much keen on making this experiences very interactive and insightful. So we are promising you that we will take your questions, but please post the questions on the chat platform. Now, I want to extend a warm welcome to the speaker of today. He's Sankarshan, our VP of Customer Experience. Sankarshan not only brings to the table the technical expertise of 2 decades with him, but also he serves as a trustee for Sovereign Foundation, and he was also co-author to the book Principles of SSI. His passion extends to digital trust ecosystems, governance models, and economic approaches fostering innovations within digital ID systems. So it's our privilege to welcome Sankarshan to deliver this webinar today. Welcome to the Dhiway Dialogues. Sankarshan, over to you. You can start.
Thank you, Srividya. Good to see a lot of folks. We know that a few others have also registered. This is going to be recorded and also hosted on the YouTube channel that we have. So in case you have to drop off in between, or for some reason you have not been able to join us today, you can catch up with this later. What I'm going to do is run through a set of slides, providing a bit of an overview of what we are going to talk about. The slides are deliberately kept to a level where we don't go deep into technical details, but we also have many members of the Dhiway team in the participant list. So if you have technical questions that you want to be answered or need to be clarified, put them in the chat, and a member of the Dhiway team can absolutely pick up and run with it and provide you with answers. You can also reach out to us separately as well. I'm going to start with sharing my screen and getting started, because time is of the essence and we don't want to waste a lot of time. So today we are going to talk about learner data governance and using how Mark Studio platform for it. Now, the topics that we are going to cover are fairly straightforward. We want to do a bit of a walkthrough with the risks around student data. If you have not joined any of our sessions previously, it would help if you get a baseline context of what we are talking about. So we'll give a quick recap of this concept of verifiable credentials. We'll talk a little bit about how credential lifecycle is managed with Mark Studio, and then we'll open it up for some conversations around the topic. Now, before we go deeper and further down our conversation and discussion today, this is just one thing that I wanted to put up to give a context of what it is all about, because we live in a society that is built around exchange of data, regardless of any domain, be it learner records, which is education, or business, or workplace and skilling and others. Records are created, issued, and exchanged to have access to various kinds of uh, services, opportunities, business, even financial help and credit lines and so forth. If you have been paying attention, you realize that some of these headlines that you see on the screen are very familiar to you. They're actually from the last 4 or 5 months, or probably across this year. And you can see that there's a pattern to it, right? That the there are many reports about credentials being tampered and forged. Uh, all kinds of credentials get forged: learning and education record, skilling and knowledge record, workplace experience record. All of these are tampered for various reasons. And what we see in the media is just what I call the tip of the iceberg, because just because it has been seen in the media doesn't necessarily mean that this is the all of what is happening. There is much more that gets undetected, and this causes what we call a trust deficit in the system. That whenever you produce a document to be presented to somewhere, the relying party or the verifier has to spend a lot of time and effort to understand whether the document that we are presenting is authentic, correct, is has the absolute correct status that you are claiming it has, and it has been issued by somebody who is legitimate. As you can see, there are it's very common to have credentials being issued by organizations that either do not exist or are not even supposed to issue those credentials. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that our traditional process of having printed records has created systems that allow records to be copied without consent, because the storage and keeping straight of records is not very systematic or very secure. And they're sometimes the outcome of data breaches, and sometimes they're plain stolen in transit or other places. Now, the there are certain risks in data governance that are fairly well known. If you have been paying attention, the fact that the traditional approaches is very paper heavy and printed material heavy has have created large data silos of printed material, and even copies of the student data in various systems. The problem with that is that if given that it is heavily dependent on printing and exchanging, they're likely to be misused, these credentials, because the workflows in which printed credentials are exchanged means that sometimes they are handed over to a recipient who is a student, or they could be mailed to a recipient who is a student, or they could be just collected later by somebody with minimal kind of verifications to who's connected. So what usually happens is that credentials are sometimes not received by the intended recipient or the student. They're sometimes misplaced from the document pile that gets created. And in most cases, the identity and identifier attributes that the documents contain, they are misused and they're tampered with. Printed credentials are, when they are sent in over mail or other places, are often lost or damaged or misplaced, because people move about. So let's say you have an address on record at an institute, and then you have moved from that place. The credential is sent to that address location. If it is not sent back and returned to the issuing organization, the credential is likely to be handled by somebody who's not the intended recipient and abused. There's a large market in stolen credentials, and that also provides a very perverse incentive for all of these things to happen. What this creates is basically risks for the issuing organization. Or in most cases, these are education organizations who are not very well equipped to manage a lot of this data, because that's not necessarily something that they greatly focus on. And the risk that create is magnified when it comes to the fact that they are regularly audited in terms of how they are governing their data and how they're managing, how they're able to secure the data. Although I have so far talked only about the issuing organizations, these risks are essentially something that in fact all the stakeholders in the system. So the issuing organizations, the recipients who are the students, the relying parties who are the verifiers, all of them are impacted by this risk, and they actually operate in an environment of a trust deficit. So basically the only way to address a trust deficit system is very simple. The verifier ends up spending a lot of time and money trying to do the background checks that enable them to have a higher level of confidence in whatever they are verifying. And the more you spend time and money in doing all of this stuff, the process becomes slow. So opportunities that would have been ideally very instantaneously available are then delayed and gradually made available because of all of these things. Now, we believe that this is not how things should continue. We believe that there are better ways to do things. We believe that there are ways to manage data that make it more secure, that provide the holder of the information with better control and agency. We also believe that it is possible to have individuals and issuing organizations working in a manner that provide for secure data exchange between them. So quickly, what I want to do is that before I go into a bit more details about how we see Mark Studio platform helping this, I'll do a quick recap of the concept of verifiable credentials, because this is basically the underpinning of how this is all coming about. The verifiable credentials is very simple. It's a data model specification that was developed at the World Wide Web Consortium. In the simplest form, verifiable credentials represent data in such a way that it makes them tamper evident. It also allows for cryptographic verification of authorship. Now, these two terms essentially mean that you have provenance built in. You know where the who authored the credentials and where it was issued from. You are also able to see data integrity was maintained, because tamper evidence is evident approaches are possible with VCs. So the W3C VCs are cryptographically secure. They respect privacy and they're machine verifiable. The last component is important because uh, when we as an individual are producing one certificate or a document to somewhere and presenting it someplace to be verified, we think of it like, okay, I'm just one entity doing it with a verifier. But that is not always the case. Imagine if the verifier was a hiring organization that was ingesting a whole bunch of student resumes and qualifications to be able to onboard freshers to join their company. And at that point in time, you're looking at hundreds and thousands of credentials to be verified. So you need to have machine readability built in. The illustration that you see on the slide is a very simple thing in terms of showing you what happens when you have verifiable credentials based system. You have issuers that issue a verifiable credential, the holders who acquire and store those verifiable credentials, and verifiers who can verify them. The the this is a very common workflow. Like this the same thing that happens today in the systems that we have familiar with, where it is printed records that are exchanged. The trick with verifiable credentials is that they're also written to a verifiable data registry, which allows the verifiers to do instantaneous verification of the credentials without requiring to phone back the issuing organization. And today, when somebody is trying to verify, they actually perhaps do it themselves or contract it out to third parties who, as part of their background verification routines, have to reach out to the issuing organizations and be able to determine as to whether all of this information that they're trying to check and validate, are they correct and accurate and up to date or not. You can essentially cut down on that step, having to phone back home if you are using something like a verifiable data registry. A lot of the verifiable credential based systems use distributed ledger technologies or an implementation of DLTs called blockchain to be able to manage the verifiable data registry. The reason I introduced them as a verifiable data registry and then as a blockchain is because there are also implementations where other kinds of DLTs are used. Sometimes those are not blockchains. But nonetheless, blockchain-based verifiable data registries are fairly common. They're fairly well used, well understood, and they have been handling a reasonable volume of issued credentials over a period of time. Now, the question then becomes, what is a verifiable credential? The verifiable credential is fairly simple thing. It is really a claim that has an associated proof and some metadata with it. What could be an example of this? Let's say I have a claim that says I am over 18 years old. A proof of that would be a document that gives that establishes my year of birth. A credential metadata could be about a fact that when this credential was issued and other stuff around the proofs and all of that. That in a nutshell is a verifiable credential. It's very simple to understand. It uses concepts that we are already familiar with in our everyday life. And essentially, this entire payload is cryptographically signed. to be able to make it secure and have there is and proof of authorship as well. Now, verifiable credentials could be issued by an issuing organization, or they could be also issued by oneself. So, like a self-attested verifiable credential, just like there are self-attested documents that we use sometimes these days. The other thing, very cool thing about verifiable credentials is that multiple verifiable credentials can be composed together to make a verifiable presentation. Again, the concept behind the verifiable presentation is very simple. It is a bunch of verifiable credentials with all the proofs added and some metadata about the presentation. So that's basically the two important foundational concepts that are essential to understand and grasp when we think about how all of this is happening. We'll take this to a scenario that might be very familiar to all of us, which is a simple credentialing scenario. Uh, this is something we are very familiar with because we have seen this all the time. Someone who has graduated from an institute, they are issued a certificate from the university, and they take the certificate, and then they probably take the certificate and approach a prospective employer to seek new opportunities and in either in a professional development or in their personal development or further their education and all of that. Now, the current scenario, what happens is that you have the university issuing it. Well, forget this blockchain bit for a moment. You have this university issuing it to the holder. The holder or the recipient then provides it to the potential employer. They then do an independent verification. In the traditional scenario, the potential employer would have rung the university or checked with the university directly. Like we mentioned, having a verifiable data registry ensures that they can actually use the credential, do a lookup on the registry, and be able to reassure themselves whether the who issued the credential, to whom it was issued, what was it about, what is the current state of the credential, and whether the credential has been maintained the data integrity. As you can see that it is important to also understand the current state or status of the credential, because status of the credential is necessary in a lot of cases to provide access to future opportunities and future services and avenues to do things. You in a in a world where there is printed certificates being exchanged, what happens is that the status of the credential and the current live status of it is determined by what you see, what you have in your hand, or perhaps as a PDF on your email or on your screen. In a verifiable credential, you don't need to trust that. What you need to trust is the status that is provided back to you by the registry. Uh, in this case, as you can see, there are certain things introduced over here. The fact that there is a blockchain that is there. This represents, in case of Dhiway, the cord blockchain network that we have. The Mark Studio is the credentialing platform that is used by the university to issue records. Uh, a bit more elaborate layout of it is this illustration, where let's say the university issues a record and anchored the transaction record of it on the cord blockchain. The digital credential is sent over an email or notified to the holder via the digital wallet. They can use those credentials to search to apply for as a to a job and respond to the requirements of the job using those credentials as proof. Obviously the company that is offering the employment opportunity will request those credentials, specific information bits, and they'll be verified. The holder can actually use, if they're using verifiable credentials that are stored on a wallet, the holder can actually use the something called selective disclosure to disclose specific parts of from various verifiable credentials to respond to some of the requests from the organization. For example, if an organization requests you to say, provide us with the name that is on as it is on a foundational ID, your address as it is on a different ID, and the transcript as it is seen by the as it is provided by your university, and let's say a school living certificate as it was issued by your school, you can actually compose all of these verifiable credentials in a manner that makes for a almost like a digital payload that is secure, cryptographically signed, and verifiable. There's another part to it, the fact that you can create verifiable presentations out of verifiable credentials. You can also end up having a situation where you are creating something that is similar to a digital resume. You've across your learner's journey, you have acquired a whole bunch of credentials that could represent your learning and education, your skills. Perhaps you have participated in workshops that helped you acquire specific kind of skills. You have taken part in extracurricular activities. You have received acclaims from other institutions. You can collect all of that as needed, wrap it up into a verifiable presentation, which basically is like a digital resume, and create custom verifiable presentations to be presented to employers and other organizations which seek information from you. The organization that is seeking such details from you to uh, offer employment opportunities might also be using a blockchain, as this illustration shows. They might be using the cord blockchain to actually anchor some of the workplace credentials, like an offer letter or a payroll pay slip, on the blockchain, and issue them as verifiable credentials, so that you can then create an entire stack of all of these together. That's basically how one simple use case gives you an insight into the ecosystem that can grow around it. Because even though we started talking about how it is important to have secure data of learners, you realize that secure data of learners creates high value credentials that can then be exchanged within an ecosystem. Could be exchanged for future learning opportunities, future credit lines and all of that, grants and scholarship, or future employment opportunities. Now, if you have high value credentials circulating within the ecosystem, you create credential liquidity. And that is how a digital trust ecosystem emerges, and makes it possible for more people to transact with higher degree of trust and assurance. Now, a verifiable credentialing platform is essentially very important foundational bit to the step towards taking a trusted digital ecosystem, because it's a game-changing approach that enhances individual credibility and reputation by providing secure, high quality, high fidelity credentials to be exchanged. Because the credentials that are created and exchanged are also low touch, by which I mean that they can be machine verifiable in large batches. It also means that more and more opportunities can be provided at a much lower cost and make these things made more efficient. Uh, if anybody is using a verifiable credentialing platform to issue credentials, manage the life cycle of them, and also be able to um, extend their usage across various things, what happens is that the holders of these credentials can actually end up claiming and requesting signed verifiable credentials, which we have been talking about so far. They can build dynamic resumes, just as we mentioned in kind of the previous example. And they can control and manage their own data, because now they are not doing an all or nothing approach to sharing data. Today, when we have printed records, we are doing basically an all or nothing approach to sharing our records and sharing our data. With verifiable credentials, this dynamic changes. It pivots to something that I can actually, I have more agency and control over data that I want to share, and I can pick and choose data elements that I can do. Because of the capability of effectively processing large volumes of records efficiently and in a manner that allows for good data audit trails, organizations benefit because they can now improve their onboarding experience. They can create efficient onboarding flows like recruitment flows. They reduce the time to issue and verify records. They can also create brand campaigns around it. It is being fairly commonly seen that many organizations are also using some of the verifiable credentials that they use to build brand campaigns around their upcoming brand events, upcoming workshops, and all of that. Uh, Because verifiable credentialing platforms like Mark Studio allows third-party application developers to come on board and integrate their other applications, they creates a situation where an extended ecosystem of applications that contribute to a digital trust ecosystem. So applications like HR and payroll system, vendor relationship management, recruitment platforms, so like the hiring platform that exist, these can be integrated with Mark Studio. The credential issuance flows can be automated and integrated, and user permission data exchange can be done. So it is important to keep in mind that The security of data is not just about creating cybersecurity policies that help you uh, identify, detect, and mitigate cybersecurity threats. It's also important to understand that you have to be able to manage the data in a manner that makes it secure because of the format in which you are creating and storing the data. If you are looking at creating large data silos, um, at some point in time, data breaches will happen because it is it is always a continuous effort to create a cybersecurity stance that anticipate new avenues and new vectors, and then prevent the data from being breached or being stolen and misused. So one of the stronger ways to augment your cybersecurity stance is to be able to also look at data in verifiable records and documents that you create, and look at the approaches like verifiable credentials to ensure that the data silos are they're not maintaining data in a manner that can be easily breached. The Mark Studio credentialing platform from Dhiway is one of the ways in which a transition from a very traditional paper PDF-based system of credentials can happen to a verifiable credential system. The workflow is fairly simple. You design the certificate that you want to do on Mark Studio because it provides a designer element that allows you to manipulate image assets, brand assets, and all sorts of other things. You upload your data set in a spreadsheet format or a CSV format, and you can actually start uploading and issuing in bulk to all your recipients. The experience for the recipient or the holder is fairly simple. They could receive a credential on email, or they could receive a credential on a wallet. If they are using the wallet, they can actually use the selective disclosure paths that are available to be able to manage and govern the data that they and data that they present to a verifier can get verified instantaneously because there is no intermediary built in. The verifier actually uses the path directly to look up the verifiable data registry. In this case, we call blockchain, and be presented with a response that it makes it possible for them to understand whether the credential and the record they're looking at, whether it is legit, current or not. Now, on our YouTube channel, we have a number of videos that walk you through as to how you begin your journey on Mark Studio by designing a certificate, issuing your first credential and all of that. Do look up those resources. If you want to reach out to us to help you walk through any of these, at the end there's a contact details are there on at the end of the slide, and you can reach out to us absolutely, and we'll get you started on that. The key takeaway from this, if you want to look at it that way, is very simple and very precise. It is that the transition from traditional paths of credentialing to a more modern, secure approach is easy. Uh, Platforms such as Mark Studio exist to enable either a web-based issuer experience, or an application integrated issuer experience, third-party application integrated issuer experience. The transition allows you to ensure that you are managing the data in a manner that is far more secure. You are actually not creating data silos and data pools that can be breached. But more importantly, you are enabling an experience for the recipient or the holder that allows them to securely share all of their claims without having the fear of that those claims might be stolen without their consent and reused and repurposed by others. So what does a credentialing platform like Mark Studio help do? It really creates because it does creates a fluid exchange of credentials. It creates credential liquidity. Since you have credential liquidity, you have a repository of credentials that have been created. You create a situation where trust and reputation-based interactions are possible. Credentials by themselves include data provenance and authenticity. So you have that capability and attributes built in. You mitigate the risks of data theft and misuse, and hence you are actually contributing to your data governance stance that you have and the data governance policy. It also means that any security audits that you run will end up being putting you in a better place, because now you have reduced the footprint of data that you are managing within your organization. You also create high quality data registers because you are creating high quality data credentials that are being exchanged across the ecosystem. And you create an user centricity in data governance. You are focused more on the user, and hence you are able to understand the scope of your roles and what you do. And you are now able to ensure that the user also understands their role in this entire data system. So the user goes from being a very passive recipient of the data that is created, they become an active participant in how to manage the data and be able to do things with it. You can get started with Mark Studio today. This is just one illustration that talks about various kinds of capabilities that are there. Like I mentioned, you can have image assets being added, shapes, colors. It is like a proper designer platform, design platform that allows you to create the design of the test certificate or the credential, and then ensure that you are issuing those as a verifiable credential. You can get started with Mark Studio today at studio.dhiway.com. One of the things that we have always seen with Mark Studio, as we have reached out to various prospects and customers, is that they want to get started, but they don't want to commit to an initial investment or an outlay. So one of the things that exists on Mark Studio is that you can sign up for a free plan. You have up to 1,200 credentials free annually available to you, and you have access to a rich library of templates that allow you to design a whole lot of credentials like certificates, IDs, event passes, workshop badges, and all of that. So that gets you to a place where you can get started and will be able to uh, build the level of confidence and understanding that allows you to then say, okay, I need to integrate it as part of my regular workflow. So I need to use this I need to subscribe to a plan. You don't have to be hindered from trying out Mark Studio with any initial payment commitment. You can try it out free, and 100 credentials per month is reasonably and sufficiently number for you to get started and get going. Um, you can these are the contact numbers for us for our sales team. Should you want to reach out to us and get started, my takeaway for you is that the digital ecosystem around us is changing, and if you want to join us in reshaping it to build it on trust and continuous assurance, Dhiway's products and services are one of the easiest way for you to get started. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We will open it up for a few conversations, and then we'll see how it goes from there.
Yeah. Thank you, Sankarshan. And as you said, it's the need of the hour, and everybody is starting to realize the need of verifiable credentials in educational ecosystem. This is the time you can post your questions on the chat, and I'll give a minute for it. But we have some questions which we got from our registered webinar participants who have not joined, some of them, but and they have actually given us some questions. So I'm going to ask you one of the questions which I found very interesting. So one of the question which I want to ask you is that we talked about a lot on the verifiable credentials and the presentation part of it and how it is important, where unfakeable credentials is something which everybody is looking out in an educational system. But how do you see this landscape of verifiable credential evolving in this educational sector, and what kind of opportunities it present for the innovation part of it, if you can take
Oh,
some.
I think one of the things that we have to be mindful is that these are probably early days, because we are seeing a number of educational institutes and even other kinds of organizations slowly transitions from their existing process to this new approach. And the changes that we have seen are so far, some of these are organizational, because every organization which has existed for quite a period of time has built out a whole data set of credentials that they want to also transition. So the one part of it is when deciding when to start and where to start from. And then having a parallel approach to be able to ensure that the transition of legacy credentials continues, whereas the future keeps on being directed towards verifiable credentials. So that's one part of it. The second thing that we have seen so far is that um, a number of organizations are slowly realizing and agreeing that the reputation of the organization is an important asset that they have to maintain and they have to elevate, because even though there are various ways organizations are evaluated, like there are surveys and gradings and all of that come out. But if the credentials are abused and tampered and forged, there is a general trust deficit that gets created about the organization. So the reputation maintenance is one of the key things or some organization look at is as a combination of their brand and reputation as well. So that's the second thing. The third thing that is, I think, the most innovative approach that we are seeing is that even though we talk about credentialing, and credentialing essentially kind of shrinks the conversation down to the certificates and badges and all of that. Once somebody gets started, it is very easy for them to start realizing that this entire concept is about documents, verifiable documents. And so they start looking at their interaction and their transactions from a much refined lens of what is the verifiable document, what is the change that I can bring in if I also use a credentialing platform to be able to change into my verifiable documents. And thus, what we see taking a very immediate pivot is that organization go from I will do a small pilot to I want an organization-wide change that's going to bring up. And because they are bringing it by themselves, their peer organizations also realize that this is something that they have to get on board with, because it's almost like a ripple effect at that point in time. So I think these are the three key trends that I want to highlight at this point.
I know a lot of Mark Studio, you are working very closely with Mark Studio customers, and you have seen the scalability part of it, like how exactly what kind of scale Mark Studio can take, how many students and what kind of students capacity Mark Studio can take. For instance, an organization who may issue 100 certificate to an organization may issue a lakh to 3 lakh certificates in a year. Can Mark Studio take it easily? And can it take kind of compete with the printer environment which is setting there? Because there is always a question that how long it takes and what exactly it takes to issue a digital credential.
Yes, I think I think it's a fun question because generally anyone who's asking this, their mental model at that point in time is this a faster printer?
Yes, yes.
And it takes them a while to understand that the value proposition is not that this is a faster printer. The value proposition is that it's beyond printing. But really, to discuss about scale, uh, it is we have had organizations who host and manage workshops for learners and participants that go upwards of 100,000 participants per workshop, and they have been issuing it on a issuing their credentials on a monthly basis for such large workshops that are online using the Mark Studio credentialing platform. So uh, I think there are two questions to scale is like, okay, how many transactions per unit of time? And the question is like, okay, can I do that that volume of transactions over a period? I think what Mark Studio has demonstrated very suitably to various customers of ours is that it can do both. Like it can take on a high volume of transactions of records to be anchored on the blockchain and issued, and also consistently take in a high volume of transactions throughout a period to be able to give you a let's say some organization which is using this to create event passes, which is another emerging use cases. Nothing related to student data, but event passes has been a surprising use case that we have seen, and events of large capacity, and they have been able to design an issue without any trouble or the system going down on them. So it's fairly capable at this point in time.
some of the participants have asked this question that do you think our student data will be safe in Mark Studio? How are you kind of telling that the student data which is coming to Mark Studio and anchored on core blockchain be safe?
So I think the way to look at safe is there are two aspects to it. One is the fact that is the data being provided or exposed to everyone in a manner that lends it to be easily tampered. No, because the data, even though a printable form of a credential could be tampered with, the actual data set and the record that's anchored on the chain represent the true state of the data. So in that case, uh, whoever is the recipient and the issuer, they can always be reassured that the actual data set is not being tampered. The other part is obviously, is the data accessible? Now, the data is not accessible, obviously, because the blockchain anchors a transaction, the hash of the data transaction that represents the record, and the PII data is stored off chain. So you don't have PI, personally identifiable information on the chain. So looking at those two aspects is what I think provides an answer to what is the definition of safe and why we are saying that it is safe. Because like we saw in those headlines that were there on the slide, the thing that gets abused is actually sensitive information and personal information, and then those are tampered with and circulated and cause no end of drama for whoever is the actual holder or recipient of this credential.
Okay, I have a fun question here. Okay, so then, so how is this digital PDF certificate different from this document which you say as verifiable credentials? Because most of both of the things are looking alike, and the both has a QR code. How is Hashmark different from a QR code, Sankarshan?
Okay. This has been a question that we have had forever and forever, and I think at a very early conversation with Amar and myself, we were discussing the ways in which it's there on our YouTube channel, but I'll repeat it because we have a new set of folks over here. So the PDF with a hash mark or the QR like hash mark is one representation of the credential that is generated. It is different from a general PDF or even a PDF which could have a QR from any web-based third-party service, is that the data is not in the data on the PDF is not the be all and end all of it. The data is just what you have as a credential is a representation. The real data is the one that is anchored and is packaged and presented. So I think those who are looking at, again, this is, I think, a perception thing, that you're looking at the PDF and trying to say, oh, this PDF has a QR, that PDF doesn't has a QR. So if I add a QR, probably this will be, no, it's not going to be apples to apples, because if you are not using a verifiable data registry like the cord blockchain, if you're not providing immutability of data, if you're not providing the opportunity for anybody to all look up the current status of the credential, then you are not providing the verified or the relying party with the reassurance that they're looking at the correct data set with the correct status and all of that. And the PDF, like for example, let me sort of contrast this example. Let's say I have received a certificate because I have participated in a workshop, but then I realized that my name has been spelled wrongly. So I go back and ask for a reissue with the correct name. Now, at that point in time, I have two certificates, right? And very rarely do organizations actually say, okay, come back and submit the previous one so that we can tear it up and there will be no copies of it. But between these two incidents, like me receiving the first one and requesting a corrected one, if I had already made a couple of copies and circulated it and given it to people to whom I can say, hey, this is a minor error, excuse it, but this is what it is, and they are okay with it, I have just circulated incorrect credentials in the market, right? So basically, that is the part, is that you have to reduce the impact of incorrect data sets being circulated, and verifiable credentials is one way that can be done.
Thank. Okay, I'm just looking any other questions which are there. Okay. Okay. Can I take a printout of my certificate with the QR anchor on chain as part of my digital certificate?
Yeah, the data that would be anchored on the chain, yes, the data would be represented as the hash mark or the keyword, and you can absolutely take a printout because we believe that since we started Mark Studio, we have actually understood one thing, that change brought about like with a boiling the ocean approach, by which we say that, oh, there's going to be nothing that is going to be print ready or a PDF, everything is going to be in a wallet, is going to create more shock and awe and create more pushback and resistance from organizations from adopting it, because the entire experience credentialing experience is built around printed tactile material. Like for instance, even though we have institutes that actually use verifiable credentials that they generate out of Mark Studio's the Mark Studio platform, they still have a convocation ceremony, right? So they actually still print out the certificate with the hash mark and they hand it over to the students. Now, is this going to be the same going forward when students can receive it in their digital wallets? I don't know, and I don't think we at Dhiway have a good answer to it. But this is tradition, and this is an interesting overlap between the modern tradition, modern ways, and the traditional ways where the certificate and convocation and all of that happens, and it is also verifiable. So you at least have a record that is of higher quality and higher assurance than what you had previously. I hope I was able to respond to you, Pradeep.
Thank you, Sankarshan. Thank you for this insightful discussions today, because this was a lot of the need for this discussion happened because of the questions which we get from our customers and also with our partners. And I hope this webinar serves as a tool to kind of understand these questions more clearly. And I'll say thank you everyone who joined us today. And this I will definitely will be published in our channel of Dhiway Dialogues, and definitely will be available in our YouTube channel as well. So please stay tuned for our third edition, and we'll be announcing it soon. And you can reach us, yeah, you can reach out to us at info@Dhiway, and the details which for if you have to reach out to our sales team, that details was given in this last slide. So we will if anybody wants to be kind of connect with us, please write to us at info@dhiway.com. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.